Welcome back to The Explainer. Look, if you're on that journey from absolute beginner to advanced cybersecurity pro, you already know that theory is only going to get you so far. Sure, reading about network fundamentals or the OSI model is totally essential, but eventually, you got to get your hands dirty. You need to practically apply what you're learning. But here is the massive roadblock every single student and aspiring bug bounty hunter faces. Where do you actually do it? Well, today, we're focusing entirely on building what I like to call the hacker's safehouse. Basically, a completely isolated virtual dojo using VirtualBox and Kali Linux. In this explainer, we're going to walk through exactly how to set up this environment so you can practice real, hands-on ethical hacking safely. It's kind of the ultimate paradox of learning cybersecurity, right? To actually defend against cyber attacks, you have to understand exactly how those attacks work, which means you have to execute them yourself. But how do hackers practice legally? I mean, you can't just fire up a terminal and start launching SQL injections or reverse shells or random websites on the open internet. Doing that is incredibly dangerous, highly unethical, and quite simply very illegal. The second you run an unauthorized Nmap scan or try to brute force a live server, you're crossing a major line. So if the real world is totally off limits for target practice, we have to artificially construct our own world.
Okay, let's dive into this and look at our first major topic: why hackers need isolated labs.
Never target real websites. Honestly, isolation is survival. In cybersecurity, especially when you start messing around with things like malware analysis or exploiting buffer overflows, you are handling digital dynamite. You absolutely need an environment where these exploits have a zero blast radius. Think about a real-world cyber attack. It's chaotic, it spreads like wildfire, and it damages real infrastructure. Our goal is to completely contrast that chaos with a perfectly controlled, sterile testing ground. When you're learning how to capture authentication tokens, you want to do it inside with essentially a digital hazmat suit. An isolated lab ensures that whatever happens inside the lab stays inside the lab. It's a walled-off network that has absolutely no way to communicate with your home network, your personal files, or the public internet. If a piece of malware goes rogue, the only thing that breaks is a disposable digital clone, not your actual physical computer. Which brings us to the technology making this all possible. What is a hypervisor?
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the definition itself. A hypervisor is simply software that creates and runs virtual machines, safely separating them from the underlying hardware. To build our sterile testing ground, we rely on this tech. And honestly, it feels a little bit like magic when you first use it. If you want to literally build a computer inside a computer, this is how you do it. Think of the hypervisor like a really strict digital landlord. Your physical computer is the apartment building. The hypervisor comes in and sections off parts of that building, giving a specific amount of RAM, a chunk of CPU power, a slice of hard drive space to create completely separate contained apartments. These are our virtual machines. And the landlord makes sure the tenant in apartment A has zero access to apartment B or to the building's master control room. Without it, we'd have to buy dozens of physical laptops just to practice. To put that into perspective, let's look at the two main players in this hypervisor relationship. On one side, we have the host OS. This is your actual physical computer, your everyday Windows, Mac, or Linux machine. It holds your personal photos, your banking details, your real life. It is vulnerable. On the other side, we have the guest OS. This is the isolated, highly disposable virtual machine, living perfectly trapped inside the hypervisor's containment unit. If you accidentally execute a devastating command inside the guest OS, well, it might be destroyed, but your host OS, your real computer, doesn't even feel a scratch. You just delete the broken guest OS and spin up a brand new one in seconds. It's exactly like a video game respawn, but for an entire operating system.
All right, let's move right along to setting up VirtualBox. For our Safehouse, we're relying on VirtualBox. It's a free, open-source, industry standard for both beginners and pros. This is the software layer we're going to install directly onto our host OS to act as the digital landlord. And turning these abstract concepts into reality is actually super straightforward. Step 1, you just install VirtualBox onto your main machine. Step 2, you download the image for your guest OS. And Step 3, you launch it inside an isolated environment. Literally just 3 steps to transform your everyday laptop into a secure, contained facility that can run advanced penetration testing simulations.
Next up, we are equipping Kali Linux. Real, practical, ethical hacking begins right here, because setting up the hypervisor is really just pouring the concrete foundation. Now we have to equip the lab. And to do that, we introduce Kali Linux as our primary guest OS inside VirtualBox. Now, Kali is definitely not your average operating system. You wouldn't use it to write a novel or check your email. It is a highly specialized Linux distribution designed from the ground up for penetration testing and security auditing.
It comes preloaded with an incredible arsenal of tools that you need to demonstrate attacks practically. We're talking about the exact tools requested in professional learning paths: Nmap for network discovery, Wireshark for deep packet inspection, Burp Suite, GoBuster, SQL Map, Metasploit, and password crackers like Hashcad. By dropping Kali inside VirtualBox, you are handing yourself the keys to a fully stocked armory, completely isolated from your host machine.
So, the crucial point is this final section, the ethical hacking mandate.
Because look, with all of this power comes an absolute non-negotiable responsibility. Setting up Kali gives you the tools to break into systems, but since we are just practicing, we do not have authorization to test random sites on the internet. We have to supply our own targets. Thankfully, the community has provided some amazing, completely legal targets for us. You can set up vulnerable web apps like DVWA, the Damn Vulnerable Web App, or the OWASP Juice Shop. You can even install an intentionally vulnerable operating system like Metasploitable as a second guest OS right next to your Kali machine. Plus, you can use safe, authorized external platforms designed for learning, like Hack the Box Academy, TryHackMe, and VulnHub. These are your legal punching bags where you can practice all day without ever breaking the law. And this brilliantly illustrates the core philosophy of our entire setup. Everything must emphasize ethics and legal authorization. This isn't just some polite suggestion, guys. It is the professional standard. Building this isolated lab isn't just a neat technical trick to stop malware from spreading, it is a strict ethical requirement. It's literally the only way to ensure that your journey in cybersecurity is done with complete integrity, keeping you firmly on the right side of the law. Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this explainer today. We took the totally chaotic, dangerous reality of cyber attacks and neutralized it by understanding how a hypervisor creates a perfect containment unit. We walked through using VirtualBox as our digital landlord to host Kali Linux, completely outfitting us with the best tools in the industry. And most importantly, we set the hard boundaries for our legal, ethical testing grounds. You now understand the full architecture of a hacker's Safehouse. The infrastructure is there, the tools are ready, the boundaries are set. So I'll leave you with this. You have the Safehouse. What will you legally test first? Will you uncover some hidden directories, maybe analyze a packet capture, or try your very first local privilege escalation? The lab is yours. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer, and keep learning.